Sally lay in bed, cocooned beneath the cozy layers of her blankets. As she stirred, she slowly sat up, her eyelids heavy with sleep. With a deep yawn, she stretched her arms and rubbed her eyes, trying to shake off the remnants of slumber. Opening her eyes halfway, she squinted into the dimness of the room, still lost in the hazy space between dreams and reality. Time seemed irrelevant as she lingered in that drowsy state, oblivious to the ticking of the clock. Turning her gaze towards the window beside her bed, she was greeted by the sight of a darkened sky adorned with twinkling stars. The cool night air seeped through the glass, carrying with it a sense of tranquility that enveloped her in its embrace. The clock on the wall showed 10 p.m., an hour past Sally's usual bedtime. Speaking to herself in a groggy murmur, she mumbled, "Is it time to wake up?" before clumsily climbing out of bed. Sally, a little girl of just 6 years old, had recently celebrated her birthday. With her eyelids still weighed down by sleep, she staggered across the room and reached out to pat the top of her bed, as if seeking reassurance in the familiarity of her surroundings. Her hand searched the empty space on the bed, then brushed against something soft. It was her stuffed giraffe, waiting faithfully where she had left it. Grasping the giraffe tightly to her chest, Sally felt a sense of comfort wash over her. With her beloved toy in hand, she shuffled out of her room. The hallway was dimly illuminated by a couple of night lights scattered along its length, casting gentle glows in the darkness. Sally trod softly, the only sound echoing in the silent house. Sally stood outside her parents' door, her hand poised to knock. But before she could, a familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. "Wait, we're talking about Sally, right?" It was her mom's voice, cutting through the quiet of the night. For a moment, Sally froze, unsure of what to do. Then, as if shaken from her hesitation, she lowered her arm and stood silently. Her dad's voice followed, breaking the tension. "Of course, who else would I be talking about?" Sally's mom sighed. Frank, don't be that way. I just wanted to make sure we're on the same page." With a small sigh of relief, Sally waited outside the door, listening to her parents' conversation drift through the quiet hallway. Sally leaned in close to the door, her heart racing with curiosity, and pressed her left ear against it, straining to catch every word. The voices of her parents grew louder and clearer, filling her ears with their conversation. Why were they talking about her? Sally couldn't help but wonder. She rubbed her ear against the door, as if trying to get even closer to the source of the discussion. "I know this is a big step for Sally," her dad's voice came through the door, "but it will be good for her." Her mom's response was hesitant. "But is she ready? She's still so young." Sally's breath caught in her throat as she absorbed their words, pondering their meaning. The sound of her dad's footsteps echoed through the room, growing louder as he moved about. Then, suddenly, they came to a stop. Sally's grip tightened on her stuffed giraffe, her pulse racing with uncertainty. Were her parents considering something that involved her? The thought sent a shiver down her spine. "She's not that young, Mary," her dad's voice came through the door, breaking the silence. Sally's heart skipped a beat. What did he mean by that? A moment of tense silence followed before her dad spoke again. "She can take care of herself." Sally's mind raced with questions. Were they talking about her independence, or something else entirely? But then her mom's voice interjected, her tone filled with doubt. "No, she can't. She can't even tie her own shoes." Sally felt a wave of relief wash over her. Her mom wouldn't let her dad make any drastic decisions, would she? She hugged her giraffe tightly, reassured by the familiarity of its softness. Sally's breath caught in her throat as she listened to her parents' conversation, her mind racing to understand their words. There are other people who can help her tie her shoes, or you know what? Before she goes, we can get her those shoes with the straps her dad suggested. Sally's heart pounded with confusion. Go where? What were they talking about? Her mom's voice wavered with uncertainty. But she'll be without us. Her dad's response was firm. And isn't that a good thing? You're with her. Every single day. Sally's mom's tone turned defensive. You say that like it's a bad thing. Hey, I'm just stating the truth, her dad countered. You're with her all the time. You could use some more time, don't you think? Sally's mind whirled with questions. What were they planning? And why did it involve her being away from them? Sally's mom sighed. I think she's my baby. Sally's dad let out a heavy sigh, the weight of his words hanging in the air. But she's not a baby, not anymore. It's time to let her go. It's time to let her grow up. His words echoed in the quiet room, prompting a response from Sally's mom. You don't get it, she countered, her voice tinged with emotion. You work at an actual office, I work from home. I would be the one stuck at home all day in a quiet house. I'd miss her, Frank. Sally's dad tried to rationalize, don't you think you're being dramatic, Mary? No, Sally's mom replied firmly. I don't think I'm being dramatic, I think I'm just trying to view how this will affect the future. The future involves change, her dad reasoned. Things can't be the way they are forever. Their words hung in the air, each reflecting the internal struggle between holding on and letting go, between the comfort of the present and the uncertainty of the future. In the silence that followed, Sally's thoughts swirled like leaves caught in a sudden gust of wind. Clutching her stuffed giraffe tightly, she sought solace in its familiar softness, trying to make sense of the conversation unfolding behind the closed door. Surely it was all a misunderstanding, she reasoned. Her parents loved her, didn't they? The idea of anything else was too difficult for her young mind to comprehend. As the talking resumed, Sally's attention snapped back to the door, her ears straining to catch every word. Her mom's voice broke through the quiet, tinged with sadness and uncertainty. I know the future involves change. It's just ... just so soon. Soon, Sally's dad's voice countered, firm and resolute. We've been thinking about this for years. The weight of their words hung in the air, casting a shadow over Sally's understanding of her family dynamics. She hugged her giraffe tighter, seeking comfort in its presence as she grappled with the realization that change was inevitable, even in the midst of love. Sally's heart raced, her young mind struggling to grasp the weight of her parents' words. Years? How long was a year anyway? The concept felt overwhelming, beyond her understanding. As her dad's voice continued, Sally's anxiety grew. She may be without us, but she won't be alone. Her mom's hesitant response offered a glimmer of hope. Maybe you're right. But before she could finish her sentence, Sally began to shake uncontrollably. The realization of what her parents were discussing, the uncertainty of what it meant for her, overwhelmed her small frame. Fear gripped her, squeezing her chest and stealing the breath from her lungs. Sally's world seemed to spin as her mom's resistance crumbled under her dad's pressure. Was her mom really giving in to the idea of letting her go? But something awful could happen to her out there, burst out Sally's mom, her voice trembling with fear and desperation. Sally nodded in agreement, her own fears echoing her mom's words. Her dad's voice, though calmer, carried a sense of finality. It's not like we even have a choice anymore. Sally's mom's plea cut through the air, filled with anguish. But we do have other options. With a heavy sigh, Sally's dad seemed to steel himself for what he believed was inevitable. No, those options won't work out, and you know it. We have to do this. It's time for Sally to go. Sally's heart sank as the weight of their words settled over her like a suffocating blanket. The realization that her parents were discussing sending her away filled her with a mixture of confusion, fear, and heartache. She hugged her stuffed giraffe tighter, seeking comfort in its familiar presence, as tears welled up in her eyes. "No," Sally whispered, her voice barely audible. "Did you hear something?" Sally's mom asked, her voice tinged with concern. But before Sally could answer, she turned and ran quietly back to her room. Alone in her bed, Sally clutched her stuffed giraffe tightly to her chest, tears streaming down her cheeks. The weight of the conversation, the fear of what might come, overwhelmed her, and she cried herself to sleep. Meanwhile, in the living room, "I didn't hear anything," Sally's dad, Frank, replied, his brow furrowed with worry. He sat down next to his wife, Mary, and enveloped her in a comforting embrace. Mary leaned into him, her own tears beginning to fall as they both grappled with the difficult decisions that lay ahead. Frank tenderly kissed Mary on her forehead, his gesture of affection offering a moment of solace amidst the turmoil of their conversation. "Look," he started gently, his voice filled with empathy. "I know you think she's not ready for this, and I understand your concerns about the other options we considered. But they won't work, not with both of us working." Mary nodded in agreement, her expression reflecting the weight of their shared dilemma. I know," she whispered, her voice heavy with resignation. Frank's words hung heavy in the air, his voice laced with a mix of concern and determination. "And I think the person who may not be ready here isn't Sally, but you. I think you're the one who isn't ready." Mary's eyes widened at his directness, her heart skipping a beat at the truth in his words. "You held her back from kindergarten and pre-K," he continued gently. "And now you want to quit your job and homeschool her. But first grade is different. First grade isn't optional." She nodded slowly, absorbing his words, the weight of responsibility settling heavily on her shoulders. "Besides," Frank added, his tone softening, "it's not like we're getting rid of her. We're just sending her off to start school." Mary exhaled slowly, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly as she began to see the situation from a different perspective. Maybe Frank was right. Maybe it was time to let go, to trust that Sally was ready for this next step, and to embrace the changes that lay ahead.